Hello, once again, beautiful people. This is Gene Bard Busico Jr. coming to you with our latest random thought. It truly was random, and I felt so strongly and inspired by this because, well, I know that it's fitting, and I know that there may be some people out there who, like myself, at times have struggled with this issue. And the issue in particular, of course, as the title will indicate, is letting go simplified. Now, what do I mean by that, by letting go? I'm speaking specifically in terms of relationships. And this is something that it would be helpful for us to keep an open heart and open mind in entertaining. Okay? As you guys know, I'm typically very methodical in the way I speak because the information comes to my mind and very specific scenarios come to mind also in order to kind of just, well, simplify matters for us. So here goes. How do you simplify letting go in personal relationships? You know, this is one of my favorite phrases, and that's take an honest look at yourself. So, of course, you definitely have to do that. Be honest with yourself and say to yourself, have I been upfront with, number one, my flaws? Have you been upfront with the fact that you are willing to take and accept full responsibility in your contribution to what has caused the relationship to falter? Very important questions you need to ask yourself. If you can answer that question honestly with a yes, without any reservation, then that's one of the best possible things you can have going for you. Why do I say that? Now, a caveat I want to add here, unless we're talking about just an egregious pattern of, say, infidelity and just outright blatant this domestic violence, constantly putting your hands on the other person, your partner, and constantly just outwardly, blatantly disrespecting that person, mistreating this person. If you're one of these men who, you're always coming in at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you don't show up maybe until the next day, sunrise, and you're smelling like a nightclub or a bunch of cigars, constantly not answering your significant other or your spouse's text messages, and constantly just making it very clear by your actions that she's not a priority to you in terms of men. Well, women as well. Women typically don't exhibit those behaviors, the ones I just mentioned, but we know women at times can also be, well, I'll say emotionally abusive. And they can be that physical abuser as well. But the general pattern, as far as, and speaking of generalities, women don't typically behave that way. So, and of course, I also, being a man, would speak from a male perspective. If you know you've generally been a good person to your significant other, and you also at times have been able to say to yourself that from the very beginning, or very early on in the relationship, as you got to know your partner, you were very emphatic about pointing out that the both of you have experienced some traumatic events in your past, even in childhood, and you've been that person who's been proactive about wanting to seek out therapy or counseling. And for one reason or another, there may have been some attempts to start that process, but when it came to actually applying the methodologies or the homework or the principles that you were taking home, but yet your other partner has not really been very willing to engage that process. And when you're approaching your partner and they're constantly telling you they don't feel like it, or they're constantly deferring, or maybe they'll state that they forget, and maybe they would like to have it set up to perhaps be a calendar reminder, and that happens, and yet that never materializes. And it just becomes a constant pattern as the weeks, months, and years pass, where you guys will have these issues arise in your relationship, things that become points of contention surrounding any particular issue. It could be finances, it could be wanting a closer bond emotionally, or one person not necessarily being emotionally available, or the communication suffering, if you've constantly found yourself getting into those kinds of arguments and different insecurities arise throughout the relationship and fears as a result of just that lack of a connectedness. Okay? Stay with me, guys. I know I may seem to be going off on a tangent, but I'm not. I'm going to bring all the pieces back together for us. But the point of me saying these things is, if from the beginning you've been very proactive and you've been investing yourself in a genuine way and from a genuine place, and for all intents and purposes, the other partner really has been somewhat responsive, but not truly engaged and or responsive to the efforts that you've been putting forth, and you've gone throughout the relationship feeling like it's a little one-sided and you've been frustrated, and perhaps if the issue would escalate as the weeks, months, and years pass on and the arguments become more intense, they become more heated, the language being used becomes more disrespectful at times, and at times it even gets to escalate to that of becoming physical. Not all the time, but at times very physical, or not physical to the point of you guys are literally exchanging blows like two, MMA fighters. But just that physicality has started to manifest itself. And as these things escalate, you're walking away from these arguments, either very heated verbal arguments or potentially physical arguments. And you give yourself a chance to cool off. And then you remember how you wanted to seek out or did seek out that counselor. But when it was time to do the homework, your other partner just never felt like it. You'd ask them over and over again, when are we going to, put into practice this information that we either purchased, if it's a course, or, hey, the counselor we saw a couple of weeks ago, they gave us a pamphlet to take home. When are we going to actually do this? If the other partner has not necessarily been responsive to that, and yet, of course, the issues that you recognized from the beginning are not being addressed, it's only natural that those issues are going to continue to fester and they're going to become worse. Okay, so just remember what I said in the beginning. Remember I said that if you've been honest with yourself in your contribution to the issues in the relationship, not just honest in admitting to yourself and coming to, some sort of a conclusion to yourself and having an epiphany or an aha moment, but if you've been outwardly honest and you've spoken it over and over to your partner in terms of what your contribution has been, but you've also been very outwardly open and demonstrative towards your partner and showing them that you're willing to engage whatever coursework or personal, self-help, either therapy or coursework that you need to take for yourself in order to make at least you better, but the other person is not responsive or equally willing to engage in that process, although they may have even agreed several times that there are issues. Guys, you got to be very, very honest and look at that for what it is, okay? And I know it may hurt because you start to think and wonder for yourself emotionally, well, this person won't engage. Why aren't they responsive? Don't they want this relationship to work? Or why wouldn't they want to? And of course, I know our minds can take off at 100 miles an hour. All kinds of fears and insecurities could be heightened and escalated, and you can become hypersensitive as a result. But calm yourself and calm your emotions by looking at the reality of the situation and simply remember that you've been forthcoming about the fact that you admit that there are issues, and you've also been very open and sincere in demonstrating your willingness to actively engage the process needed in order to do the work and to address your issues. You cannot obviously force your partner to want to reciprocate and do the same. And so as the weeks and the months and the years pass, those arguments and those issues keep festering and they keep escalating. And God forbid you get family members or friends involved and they're seeing this from the outside looking in, and their primary concern, or their only concern, depending on, where they stand on your relationship, is really only their friend, their sister, their daughter, what have you. Again, speaking from the male perspective, it's not a good look for anyone. Definitely not for you, not for your significant other, not for the relationship. But again, I'm saying all of these things with a purpose and intent in mind to remind you if you've been forthcoming and you can answer honestly that you've been willing and you've never shied away from the work that needs to be done in order to identify and address the issues you have, but the other partner has demonstrated by a pattern. Now, we're talking about weeks, months, and years passing. This individual, for whatever their internal reasons are, have literally continued to say, you know what, I don't feel like it. Oh, I don't remember. But for several years, for that to continue to manifest. And yet the arguments or the disagreements or the issues you guys have aren't being resolved because the underlying issues are not being addressed. It's only natural that those issues will continue to compound. Okay, guys? It's the same as with your car. My goodness. If you have an indicator light going off in your vehicle, it's a check engine light or transmission light. We know that it's obvious. We at some point in the very near future need to take that vehicle into the dealership or mechanic to be looked at. And if we ignore it, God forbid you could find yourself out there on the highway with a vehicle whose engine is locked up or shut down on you. Relationships are no different. Okay? So I'm saying that to say this. When you look yourself in the mirror and you have that honest conversation with yourself, and you can say from an honest place that, hey, I've been willing, I've demonstrated it over and over. I've been very emphatic about how willing I am to do the work and invest myself in this relationship and invest myself in, well, removing the barriers in terms of those issues because you value that relationship. If the other party has not demonstrated that they are willing to reciprocate that effort, you have got to snatch your peace of mind from that truth. And if you're a spiritual person, I know it hurts when you're thinking of just letting that person go. But if you really think about it, if you're a person who believes in God or higher power or the spirit, and you've been also praying about it, you've maybe prayed and fasted or asked relatives and friends to pray along with you so that the relationship would work. And you've been applying yourself the best way you know how with the knowledge you have access to. And you've been applying yourself, messing up along the way because, hey, you have issues and you've been engaging the process, but it takes two. Okay? It takes two. It takes two. Two willing people. If that individual decides to walk away from you and you are sincerely, although you have flaws, but you're sincerely engaging the process to improve the relationship. Should they decide to just walk away from you, I need you to know that if you're praying to God and applying yourself and they continue and they decide to just walk away, you need to have peace and understanding that was God's answer. The fact that they walk away is God's answer to you. Emotionally, that is so hard, especially when you really love a person. You may get into all types of arguments with that person, but when you're quiet and you're to yourself, you know deep down you're hurting because you love that person. You've invested yourself in the person. But what should give you peace is that if that sincere effort's been put forth on your part and they walk away, God is actually allowing that person to be removed from your life in order for that which is healthy for you to come along. Okay? Think about it. God loves you enough to know what's best for you. And if despite the best efforts and the sincere efforts you put forth, that which you wanted to hold on to so much continues to just walk away or drift away, you've got to be strong enough in order to let it go. He knows what's best. God knows what's best for you. And also find peace and solace in the fact that you have been sincere and you've been honest despite your flaws, and you've been upfront and proactive about wanting to address issues. Give yourself the ability to have peace in that. And if you've taken responsibility for your part in the matter and you've apologized and you've acknowledged you're wrong, you snatch your peace out of the situation. And as peacefully as you possibly can, allow that person who's walking away to walk away. It may be hurtful, it may be offensive that they're just walking away or throwing in the towel or giving up on you. But you need to understand, remember, God hears you. And if you're sincere and yet that continues to go in another direction, that's his answer. Ultimately, it's God's goodness moving that which is not healthiest for you out of the way. Having said that, guys, this is a hard pill to swallow, but when you think about it, it really simplifies the matter, and it eases and appeases your heart. And you can also walk away with your head held high, as well as a clear conscience. Take that and run with it. God bless you. I love you.